If you really want to make a big change at an organization, you need to solve something that maybe no one's ever solved before.
The biggest thing to me, about an experience or a product that makes it successful is you don't have to think about it. It takes away the problems.
ChatGPT is like a high schooler, but like I think GPT 2 or 3, they're like, it's like a fourth grader. And you're like doing the work is one thing, but like probably not something you just want to hand over to automation yet.
Now, someone said this the other day about, I'm not worried about AI taking my job. I'm worried about someone that is very capable with AI alongside them taking my job. Is it going anywhere? No. And it will impact.
Usually the most important thing to me is the people that I get to actually work with, because that kind of lasts, whereas digital stuff, it won't be here. Like somebody's going to come and redesign everything I've done.
Scott Noblit is the Director of Experience Design at Expedia Group, with over 20 years of expertise in UX design across various industries. He has held leadership roles at renowned brands like Gap Inc. and OkCupid. Passionate about mentorship and team development, Scott is a strong advocate for innovation and leadership within the design community. Join us for our conversation with Scott Noblit.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Scott. It's great to have you on. We've been working on this for a while, and it's good to finally get it organized and to have you on. So, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
No, it's awesome. I know you've got a lot of experience around experience design and UX as well, user experience. So, for those that may not be too familiar with your stuff, give us a bit of a background about your career and your journey to date.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like I'm in a fortunate position. I started working on websites and digital products back in I think my first job was in the year 2000. So like right before even like the dot-com bubble burst, and man, it was cool. Got to be kind of on the front edge of a few different kind of like technologies and seeing them kind of evolve right in front of me, which was really neat, especially when I was at like Food Network. And, I remember when we were like, oh, they're announcing this iPad thing. And I'm like, wait, you mean it's like my phone, but it's big? I'm like, I think we should probably have a recipe app. And just being like, all right, let's dig in. Let's try out this new thing.
Yeah, awesome. I don't know, you've obviously moved on and you're working at Expedia at the moment.
Yeah. So I've been at Expedia Group for about 5 years now. It's been really interesting. It's been really challenging sometimes, to be fair. I think hopefully everyone's starting to move a little bit past like talking about COVID and global pandemics, but obviously working at a travel company when something like that happens was interesting, and not something that
Yeah.
you really get ready for in design school.
Yeah, definitely. Just on that, it's interesting on that point. Well, what were you focusing on, during that time? Were you just diving down into, trying to refine the products, or was it a bit of an unknown, or I suppose what was going on then?
For myself, and I found this to be, there was definitely some moments of like learning some different things, especially at a big company when, a lot of things are changing really quickly that we don't have control over. Um, I was tasked initially with getting together four different kind of design groups within Expedia, and I guess kind of orchestrating getting cleanliness information up on or enhanced cleaning information up on the website and in the app, because, yeah, you sure, planes and hotels, you'd like a clean environment, but it was a little bit different than at the beginning when everyone thought you got it from like touching stuff.
Yeah.
So, and then we had those really fun design discussions about, well, what symbol says clean to people? Um, You know, is it a spray bottle? Is it a, um, I think at one point we ended up going with little stars, but that now means something different. At the time it was clean, and now it means something a little bit different these days. So kind of an interesting thing to see evolve.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I can imagine. Did you see usage? I'm imagining, especially at the start, like usage and stuff would have dropped off a fair bit across products. Is that right, or did you not see usage drop?
Oh yeah, yeah. I would say it changed. Definitely
Okay.
there was less like sales, like people could not travel, so obviously it impacted the business in a uh, pretty serious way. No
Yeah.
customers. But the thing that we had were a lot of customers who had already purchased with us, and so really, it really made us think about things. Uh, an example being getting clean, like enhanced cleaning guidelines and stuff like that in the product really quickly. Um, there were still needs there. Also, obviously people who had bought hotel rooms and flights and stuff were starting to wonder like, well, what's going to happen to my thing?
Yeah.
Um, like it, it's not the kind of thing anyone could prepare for where everything gets shut down.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely understand that. With UX research and across your career, I suppose just getting a bit more into that specifically is what's been your experience with that? And I suppose how important do you feel that is to creating these experiences that keep customers or users coming back to your product or to your company?
You know, I again, I had a really, really fortunate circumstance kind of early on. I was working for uh, the parent company Scripps Networks, who here in the States has Home and Garden Television and Food Network, and now they're part of Discovery and all kinds of other multimedia conglomerations. But at the time, um, HGTV was here in the States was a really quickly growing network, and the executives looked at the web property as, hey, this is something that could be more right than a TV guide, right? Like people would come here to actually see decorating ideas and all those types of things, which was great. And I had the really fortunate opportunity. We hired Adaptive Path, which is they've not been around for a while, but at the time they had folks like Jesse James Garrett and a whole host of other folks. Um, Dan Saffer was there at the time, so I got to meet and I was still pretty early in my career. Got to meet and work with the guy who wrote the Elements of User Experience and the guy who wrote Designing for Interaction, and got to work with them and really got to kind of see how they broke apart problems. They went out, they did a lot of ethnographic research, which was new to me at the time, of like seeing how people were really going about their day-to-day planning of their decorating projects and everything. And I'm sure it would look really different now because the digital landscape has changed a ton. But some of those moments were like really eye-opening for me. It wasn't just about like trying to make an understandable thing or make a graphic that was really attractive. It was about looking for like insights and knowledge to help you like create maybe something that's a little different, maybe something that uh, could help somebody in a new and different way.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think I commented about this on LinkedIn today. I think actually around not only taking like stakeholder input, like user input, user research is the biggest part of it of a successful product or features, whatever we want to break it down into. But if we're always validating our own assumptions or only taking kind of stakeholder input such as directors or leaders, etc., we're basically setting ourselves to fail. There's obviously merit in that. There is definitely there needs to be listened to. It's not that that it shouldn't be. But at the end of the day, the user is really the only one that matters, right? What do they want? What do they need? What are we actually doing? How do we understand what they're wanting and what they need, and how do we deliver that in the best possible way? I suppose from your experience and what you've learned over your career around experience design as well, like what are some of the key principles or key things you stick to, like that you see that you have to, to make an experience great? What are you focusing on?
Oh man. Uh, you know, I think there's a pretty broad range, especially with a lot of the different kind of places I've worked and different kinds of size of initiatives that I've worked on. Um, the one thing though that and you said something that reminded me of this, and I thought about it, was like really thinking about the user and what they're doing, and it actually goes back to this uh, insight we got when I worked at Food Network, and they were doing like in-person interviews of how like moms were figuring out how to put dinner on the table or something like that in their homes. And I remember one of the stories was of a mom holding her child in one arm and printing out the recipe on her computer. Now, obviously, we would do this way different now. Probably just do it on your phone. But uh, at that point, I thought, oh, she does not care about the little hidden menu I made over here that will do this thing. Like, she is never going, like, I know that that's not every single person that visits the website at the time or is looking at the app, but you're just kind of like, oh yeah, they she will not care about that. Like if it's not in front of her and doesn't directly address it, um, like oh she won't see it. Why am I spending? I mean, for one, you're like, am I going to spend my time there? Or for two, are we going to have engineers spend their time there? Uh, well, on something that I'm like, oh yeah, like that's not helpful. Like if there's something important to her, putting it in there is not the right place.
Yeah, yeah, and understanding those needs from users, and not just like people often talk about user experience or user research and stuff, and yeah, I understand your users and whatever else, but it's not like a superficial understanding. Like, do you truly actually understand how you're trying to help them, what they want, where do we put it, what's actually going to deliver value to them? And it's different. Those things are different across industries, domains, whatever, different users, etc. There's all different things, and it's important that those nuances are understood. The real products, I guess, that are really successful, you don't have to think about using them necessarily, right? Like they just work. I know one for me personally is Wise. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Wise, but the payment platform, and they just, the product that they've built and everything. I've been using it since they were originally TransferWise. Right, I've been using it for probably 6-7 years now.
Oh wow.
But their product and everything, they just get it right. Like there's no difficulty, and if you ever need support, if you ever need um, anything, it's literally, it's there in the product and it's just easy. Or their support, like you can literally, if you have to, which is very rare, like even just a little thing along the lines of it, you go to contact support and they ask you, or you put in they say, here's your phone number, can we call you on that number? You click it and literally it calls within 2 seconds. Like it will call your phone and you answer it, and it's like they're calling you and you know that it's legit because you just requested it and it's not a scam. I don't know, it's just the little things that add up, where the biggest thing to me about an experience or a product that makes it successful is you don't have to think about it. It takes away the problems.
I mean, I think that's really true. I I think it's it either takes away the problems or it causes other ones that you didn't know you had to go away. That's where I think like I'm sure for in this example, right? Like they've really looked at a lot of data to see, you know, oh, what kind of things are happening? How do they happen? What are people looking for? And then really baking that in. That sounds like a really good example.
Yeah, and how have you done that? I suppose over your time at Expedia, what are you overseeing there regarding obviously the experience design? What are you working on with your team and teams, I guess, to bring those things into play across your products?
We at Expedia Group, we have a pretty robust research department. I have been very fortunate over the last, you know, 3 or 4 years to work with some different really great researchers. Um, I really appreciate like our ability to kind of talk about what is it that we're really trying to learn, trying to figure out like what's the best way to go about learning it. Um, we've with travel, there's so many different touch points, right? And it's really multifaceted. Like why you want to go somewhere versus someone else can be really different. What are the things that are important to you are not going to be important to someone else? And then there's a whole host of um, like real world intersections, like yes, a lot of the things that I work on um, are definitely things that are like in the app, and they're there to help you, and they're there to help you figure out, how to take a really great trip. Um, but at the end of the day, like if we're really successful, people book some kind of trip where they get to go out and see something, maybe they've never seen before, or experience something they've never seen before. And that's always the hope, right? That everyone has like a perfect vacation. But you also have to be ready and prepare for all those times when, hey, things don't always go perfect, right? Like, man, we have seen so many uh, just really not good like airport stories of like airlines, their computers not working or people getting stranded. And, uh, then there's some real like human implications to the kind of work like anyone in this field might do, right? Where, you're trying to help people get home from hopefully a good trip, but, nobody wants to get stuck somewhere longer than they intended.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think the impact of the AI will have on the kind of user experience and I suppose experience design in general and expectations?
In general, I think it's going to change a lot of the things that we do. Um, I see it in very much near term as a well, it's like one part novelty, like okay, like these things exist, and honestly, you're able to do some things with it that maybe we only thought were going to be in sci-fi for a little bit, for a little while longer. On the other hand, I think there's some really good, clever usages of using AI to be able to do things and augment your own product or your own service. Maybe you're able to uh, kind of get over the hump with some kind of problem you're solving in your own organization, right? Where you're just like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years ago, I can remember working on things where the thing that I thought was the best way to maybe solve the problem, like we got the research, we've got the insights. I was working for Gap, and we were talking a lot about helping people make better outfits. Um, and there were some really interesting ideas, and it was just like, yeah, we just can't quite do that. Like we don't have the technology. Maybe like Google or Facebook could build something that would do this, but we're not going to be able to do this in like, from scratch.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like, okay, well, it's the problem still the problem. What can we do? Like what's the best thing we can do in this instance? And now I think you have an opportunity where some of those problems that you've identified, maybe you can take another stab at it, right? Maybe there's something there where you're like, oh, wait, um, we had a cool idea, but it wouldn't scale. we could use AI to maybe help augment some content, or we could use AI to maybe help uh, get this type of data or something else, right? And you're like, oh yeah, yeah, that's a good little clever thing that you could do that would have been extremely challenging before.
Yeah.
And then on the longer term, I'm full on like I don't want like a chip in my head or anything. I don't think I'm ready for that, but I do think there's some really interesting things that folks are doing right now that where I kind of see things changing. There's this new app called Dot. Have you seen
Okay.
it?
No, I haven't. I haven't seen
Oh,
that.
okay. It's I don't remember the guy's name. I saw it on another podcast I was watching, but he was talking about trying to really humanize the AI and its interactions. And I've been chatting with this bot just kind of to see what they're doing.
Yep.
But I feel like they've like elevated the feeling and the emotion of using some of these things that would kind of otherwise be toys to something where I'm like, oh, I kind of want to see what this thing's gonna do.
Yeah. 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 Interesting. I think it's going to have a big impact on, especially a smaller impact than some people make out in the short term, but, big in the long term, where even just experiences with what we can do with AI, there's some people that are just totally against it. They say it's a waste of time. There's no use cases for it and everything else. I disagree with that. There are use cases where it can help, for example, summarizing information. It can help with smaller generic admin tasks. It's not necessarily revolutionary as such as some people are making out, but it's only going to get better. And even things where I think the biggest thing is like kind of summarizing or conceptualizing and ideating these ideas, right? Where whether it's for UX, it's for UI, it's for content, it's for whatever, we can do so much we can test our ideas, we can test things. It's not that we take them as validated at that point, but there's so much we can do in such a short period of time that we wouldn't have been able to otherwise do. And I think that has to have an impact, right? We can test these, even if we're doing some research, we might be able to design very simply, this is the simplest example, but like 5 surveys in kind of 30 minutes, rather than it would have taken maybe a day previously or something like that there. It's just a simple example, but it's not to say that all 5 of those are perfect, but you've come up with them and now you can blend it together and you can do what you need to do and fix what you need to fix. And suddenly it's, you've been able to get much more done in a shorter space of time, and it's possibly better. You've gone through more revisions and, more different ideas, etc. as well. And especially when it comes to the UI side as well, like there's some products out there that are doing some pretty good stuff. There's some startups. There's also Figma doing what they need to do, and growing their AI offering. Again, do I think it's going to replace designers completely? No, but will designers fall out of the way, I guess, if they don't keep up with it? I certainly think so.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I wasn't, you asked me, and I wasn't even thinking about like the productivity lift for, people working at different organizations. I I definitely think there is there is room for some of these different AI things, especially for kind of like enabling creativity, not necessarily for making like the finished products. Like certainly I think we've all used one of the image generators. I'm not going to try to pass that off as my own work, but maybe if I want to see something uh, uh, to help kind of fill in the gaps, I've done that. Um, I've also found it to be pretty helpful for maybe when I have like a really abstract kind of concept or something in my head of how I think. So sometimes when I feel like part of my design process, right? a little bit with research is to get as much as I can and just like jam it all in, right? Just so deep that I'm like, oh, I can't even see straight, and then go for a walk or something. And that's when, like, all of a sudden, actually, usually when I'm walking my dog, that's usually when the best ideas. And I can kind of see in my head maybe how like some different moments connect, and then maybe I can see how some different other things connect. And um, maybe I make a note or something, or I write it down, but a lot of times it's still jumbled thoughts. And what I've found is that sometimes putting that into like um, a chat GPT or something like that and say like, hey, I'm gonna tell you blobs of stuff. I want you to like come back with something that is like intelligible in some type of bullet points that I could give to someone else and they could figure out what this is. And because then you have the chance to read it yourself and go like, oh, is this really speaking to what I was trying to say? Uh, Again, you're not using it as like a way to like cheat on your history paper or something, but like to as a tool to refine something you're already doing.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think a big part of it as well is like expectations from consumers, users, customers, whatever we want to call them, around what we can deliver in products as well, right? So it's obviously how do we use it as designers or as anyone, right, to be more productive, to produce better work, etc. But then how do we deliver that in our products to our customers? How do we enable them to produce better with what we're doing and produce, to be more productive, etc. Like, taking Expedia, I guess, example, or just travel in general is like, okay, how do we book better trips and faster, or like easier, less stress, or things like that there. Or if I'm trying to get a refund, or I'm trying to do this or whatever else, like, how can we bring that into the product where it's helping? Now, there are instances where this has been pushed too far, which Air Canada is an example of that. With, I don't know if you're familiar with what happened there with their refunds, etc., and their AI chatbot, but basically it was just giving out refunds that they had to honor that weren't actually legit. And so, yeah, like it needs to be measured, and it needs to be intelligent, and deployed properly. But there is definitely, when those things are met, there is definitely potential, massive.
I mean, maybe something to think about. When you said this, I thought, oh, you know what? Like the thing is, you're if you put it in the framework of like a jobs to be done type thing, right? Where like, oh, would you hire this person to do this job? And I'm like, would I hire an AI to give out refunds for my business? Maybe not. Like if you think like, what do they say? The like Chat GPT is like a high schooler, right? Like as far as I mean, maybe it's more now. I don't remember, but like I think GPT 2 or 3, they're like it's like a fourth grader, and you're like, yeah, that's impressive. But you're like, I don't want like the high schooler if they're the ones that have to figure that out, like the policies and everything. Like doing the work is one thing, but like all of the policies and the rules and the compliances and all that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, that's probably not something you just want to hand over to automation yet.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you totally, but I think a lot of it, for me personally, comes back to the setup and the architecture of it. Is okay, we may not have the tech there yet and whatever else, but people are like deploying it without frameworks, without guidelines, and that kind of thing, where it's like, well, yeah, you're leaving it to make its own decisions based on poor data or whatever else, poor training that and guidelines and frameworks that you've provided. So yeah, it's probably going to make mistakes, and it will make mistakes anyway to a degree. It's like there's humans that make mistakes as well, but I don't. To me, I'm somewhere in the middle. Like some people are like, oh, it's a waste of time. Don't even know why people are talking about it. Other people are like, it's going to replace all of our jobs. Right? I'm somewhere in the middle,
I,
basically saying, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, isn't that usually the truth is
Yeah,
usually in the middle somewhere? Like, I mean, I think you're very right. Like, it's obviously there would not be. cajillions of dollars invested in this stuff if there wasn't potentially something there. And I think there is obviously some things that people would be really appreciative of. I think we're almost kind of like an uh maybe like a little bit of an uncanny valley moment, like right now with the open AI, like the real like voice chat, which
Yeah,
is I mean, it's kind of neat. I'm like, hey, this is cool. This is kind of like the, part of the future that we thought we were going to get in the year 2000.
yeah,
Um, but obviously, it's not quite that. But it also isn't the kind of thing that I think everybody's just like, yeah, we can't wait. I found sometimes the more I work in this space sometimes and read about these things and try them, the more sometimes I'm like, I want to go outside.
yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah,
like
yeah,
like breathe fresh air. I'm like, okay, don't give it all to don't give it all to the digital overlords yet. Like still want to what is it they say touch grass every once in a while.
yeah. No, no, definitely. I agree. I think there's a balance to be had there. But what I say is, it's not going anywhere, and it's not going to get worse. It's only going to get better. Yes, there's mistakes. There's problems with it. But is it going anywhere? No. Right. It's only going to accelerate. It's only going to develop at a much quicker pace, and it will impact every industry, no matter what. Especially those in admin to begin with. And I think, to me, I think it's personally, around, if you learn to use it, you'll be fine, right? Now, someone said this the other day about, I'm not worried about AI taking my job. I'm worried about someone that is very capable with AI alongside them taking my job, right? That's the difference I see with it. Like, even just a small example, that I've done myself. I've built my own little script we use Google Workspace, within Google Workspace, and you can do this through other tools that are out there already, and you can do it through copying, pasting to ChatGPT, whatever else. But it's too much of a pain every time. I've built a label that I can just drop my emails into. It takes the whole context of all my conversations with that person, everything else, and it writes an email exactly like I would. It does not sound AI. Like, it's learned, it's been trained on my data, if that makes sense. It writes exactly like I would write, and it's okay. It's not doesn't get it right every single time, but probably 8 out of 10. Right? It gives me 90% of what I need, and I adjust it. And again, how much time has that saved me over the past 10 months since doing it at the start of the year? A significant amount of time, right? Where previously I would have to just write the emails alone. Then it was, okay, let me copy and paste it in chat. But now it's like, okay, you already know the context, you know everything, and just draft it. I'll edit it. I don't just send it like that, but it will do 80%, right? It does 80% of what it needs 80% of the time, and that saves me a lot of time. And that's the kind of use cases I personally see happening across. Yeah, we're talking about design here and everything else, but happening across everywhere, that I don't know why some people don't see that personally.
I was I was really fortunate to I was talking with a couple of the folks who work at like usertesting.com, and we were just kind of chit chatting, and we were talking about, and they're like, oh, what kind of stuff are you working on? And that, as they would ask, right? Like, we work with user testing and do all of our remote testing through them, as do a lot of folks, I'm sure. And we were talking, and I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of working on some of this AI, this thing with an AI, or this that other thing, and they were like, how are you talking about AI? And I was like, yeah, it's kind of tricky because, you see in the marketplace, right? Like people advertise with it, like Samsung's like, look, this has sparkles on it. Like I mentioned earlier,
Yeah,
they're not
yeah,
telling you it's extra clean, it's actually AI powered or whatever. And like, I I don't know if people really care that much. Like they probably care more about what it might do, and if what it does is magic, they'll probably like it. But uh, the the other thing is maybe by the time people will care, everything will just be AI, right? Like remember, like at one point, well, if you remember, or I'm old enough to know at one point everyone was like, "We're on the internet." And you're like, now like everything's on the internet, right? Or like we have an app, and you're like, dude, everyone has an app. So like at some point, everything will probably have AI in some space.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it will. Every industry, B2B, B2C, whatever industry, I think that it's going to impact products, experiences across the board, and it become everything with technology. As I've reflected on it, is really to me is the expectation is just about delivering speed, right? As in, like, it's about getting things done quicker and better. Not necessarily always quicker over better, but like, okay, back before the internet, like even news and things like that there, then okay, you had to wait for the paper to be printed and you get the paper. Like now it's instant, right? So the expectation is instant. That's just what happens. Okay. You used to have to ring on the phone, right? Like on a landline, as we'd call them here in Australia, but like basically you'd call and now you can video call instant. Like that's just an expect. It's not like, oh, amazing. It's like it's now the expectation. It's just whatever, that's just is what it is. Like that's what our expectation is. And I feel the same thing will happen with AI. Like it will take probably 5 years, I don't know, maybe to get there where the expectation is at that point, but it will just be like, well, I should have an answer within, like instantly. Like, where's my support ticket? Or can I get a refund? I don't want to wait 3 days or 5 days or whatever to get it. I want it now. Like, guys, I should have an answer immediately. And those things, that's just, I don't know. To me, that's just going to continue to evolve over time. And tying that, one thing I wanted to get into as well was like tying these things to business outcomes and kind of understanding your approach there and what you've done over your career, but how you're tying your kind of design work and experience design work to outcomes, business outcomes, and how you're demonstrating that.
Yeah, that is so I go back to, and again, we were talking about research earlier, and I think I think this is definitely where if you really want to make like a big change at an organization, right? Or let's put it another way, your organization wants to make something big that really matters. And look, not every place is at this moment at this time, right? Like you're not sometimes you need to do the things that optimize your business. Sometimes you need to go in and understand why somebody isn't tapping this button versus another button. Uh, and you can definitely do research around that. But if you really want to like do something bigger, then that's where getting in and trying to get some really, really deep context about what's happening. And that can be really tough sometimes depending on the industry you're in. But ultimately, you know, if I think put like my strategic thinking hat on, what I'm really looking for is like, well, what's something that maybe we can learn that somebody else hasn't yet? Or what's
Yeah,
something we can learn about and have a different approach to? Because you can always kind of go to like, I mean, to your point, you can go faster and cheaper, right? And now sometimes those are going to be your winning moves. But what if you need to solve something that maybe no one's ever solved before?
yeah,
Uh, I I think, or you're going to be able to do it in a way that nobody's imagined yet because you can apply it to technology in a new way.
yeah, yeah. I agree, and I think for us and the work that we do, kind of in we mainly, not exclusively, but mainly work with B2B and more traditional industries, and we're working on mostly internal or private applications that aren't necessarily public, such as customer portals, kind of websites, e-commerce, that kind of thing, applications. They aren't necessarily kind of large millions and millions of users necessarily, but they have a big impact business wise in regards to what they're doing. And it's so important for us to align when we're talking about like aligning design work and research and everything else with stakeholder expectations, is to go, okay, what does success look like here? Okay, well, what's the North Star, essentially, and what are we trying to achieve? There's no point of setting out saying, oh, we're building a new app. Why? Right? Or we're building this portal, or we're doing this. What are we actually trying to achieve? Are we trying to transform kind of 80% of our orders to be digital, right, where they're completely automated, right? So we may have previously taken them over the phone, through email, especially in the B2B space, kind of wholesale or manufacturing, something like that there. But are we trying to do that? Or what is the North Star, right? Because then we can work back and go, okay, we know that that's what's driving the business outcome. And if we can keep that as our success metric, everything that we do should relate back to that, right? And we should be able to demonstrate that, and therefore that's how we're tying it back to our business outcomes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was going to ask a question of you actually, because you said North Star. What does North Star mean to you? Like in the context you were saying.
Yeah, well, the North Star, I think, comes from John Cutler. He's the one that kind of just defined the North Star framework, really. But it is the North Star is the guiding, again, it's North Star, but it's a guiding principle of what are we trying to achieve here, right? Which is then essentially kind of made up of the outcomes that would show that we're moving towards that North Star, or we've achieved it, essentially. And then we also have, from those outcomes, we would have derive some KPIs, which would then indicate that we've actually achieved those outcomes. Now, I'm not saying it's the definition exactly as John puts it, essentially, but the idea behind it is that we have something we're aiming for. Like we're all aligned on a single objective, right? So
Mm,
it could be, as I said earlier, about digitalizing 80% of our orders, or it could be the fact of, okay, for this quarter, our North Star is, or for this product, or again, this can be adapted in different ways. It could be just as a product in general, as a business, this is our North Star. I know one of the examples I believe it's from John's work, or at least analysis of his work, around the fact of someone was looking at a grocery application, and one of the things was that monthly groceries delivered on time every time, I think, was the North Star, which
mm.
shows that's okay. Now everything that we're doing, does it come back to that? Helping people get their monthly groceries delivered on time every time, right? Like, is that, if it's not, if we start going off on a tangent, somewhere here, and we're like, yeah, let's go and do this, let's go and do AI, or let's do this, and like, hey, let's come back. Is it actually contributing to our North Star? Is it actually helping us get where we want to get? Is it contributing to these outcomes and KPIs? And so for us, that's what I've found helpful. We've obviously adapted it through our own 4DCX framework and what we work with our projects, etc. But the idea is, to put it simply without confusing anyone listening or getting overwhelmed, is that we need to define what success looks like, especially with the stakeholders. For us, like, what does success look like for you, and what are we aiming for? What's our North Star? And if we can agree on that, then we can go away with confidence and say, okay, all we need to make sure is that every single thing that we do contributes to that. If it doesn't, we scrap it. Right.
Mm.
And I think that's, to me, so important, where so many of these projects go wrong, or where teams go wrong, is that they are focused on delivering features, not outcomes. And it's like, okay, well, why did we do this feature? Well, no one can really tell. We thought it was cool. It's like, yeah, but it had no business impact. It had no impact. Users don't care, but they don't use it, right? We delivered it, and we can't really say why. That's the challenge.
Cool. Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Thank
You go
you.
on. I'll cut you off.
Oh, no, no, no. It's all good. I was just going to say thank you for the explanation. That's kind of more how I've usually thought about it. I've just worked in some different places where people would like make a design and pin it on the board and say, "This is our North Star." And I was always like, "Oh, that's not really how I view it." but I appreciate your explanation. It's actually more in depth than the one I would usually give. So thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Well, I appreciate the chat we've had, and I think it's been really good. I think we've discussed some great topics. So I do appreciate you coming on. I do a finale segment where I ask a couple of questions to each, well, three questions, same questions to each guest. So I'd like to get into those now if you're happy to do so.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. Well, the first one is, what's one thing you believe businesses are not paying enough attention to right now that will be critical in the next 5 years?
Oh man, wow, you do not pull punches with these questions. What's one thing? I How about this? Attention fatigue. I think
Okay.
I think every business, whether they not every business, but most businesses, especially ones that play in the digital space, whether they sell um, stocks or apps or crypto, right? They're all ultimately just competing in the attention economy. And I think at some point, like if you're if you're not careful and if that's all you're built on, like what if people finally just don't want to be bombarded all the time?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I've never had that response, so that's interesting, and I agree with you. I think it's something that needs to be thought about. The second one is, what legacy do you want to leave in your industry, and how do you hope your work will influence or shape the future?
Oh my goodness, that is like I don't know if I've ever really thought about what I do in that way. Like, actually, you know what? In this industry, if there's one thing that I always go back to, besides like the user and the things we make, but usually the most important thing to me is the people that I get to actually work with, and for all of the designers that I've managed over the years and mentored. Hopefully, the best thing I've done is actually, um, kind of paid back for some of the good mentorship I got when I was starting out. So that's probably like the most important thing to me, because that kind of lasts, whereas digital stuff, it won't be here. Like somebody's going to come and
Yeah,
redesign everything I've done.
yeah, no, awesome. I think that's great. And the final one is, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your younger self at the start of your career?
Oh my God. Can I, so I feel like the other two answers were kind of like from the heart. This one's from the heart, but this one is a little more like cynical. Is I would tell my younger self, uh, um, spend less money on tech and invest more money in Apple, because that would have been in like 2001 or 2002 or something, right before they came out with the iPod. So that probably would have been a pretty good move. That would have been way better than buying a PlayStation 2.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But no regrets, right? So absolutely, yeah, I think that's a great answer. I like that. So appreciate your time, Scott, and it's been a great conversation. Appreciate everything you've shared with us, and appreciate you coming on as well. Obviously, anyone that wants to find you, where can they find you on LinkedIn? Any other places?
I occasionally post pictures of my dog on my Instagram, but that's about it. I do a lot less of the socials these days.
Yeah, no worries. Well, anyone else that's interested in listening to other episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Deezer, any other places that you'll find your podcasts. We also got a lot of great content at our learning center at intuji.com as well. And yeah, appreciate you coming on, Scott.
Yeah, thanks for having me. All right.
Thank you.